All right, so welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you guys here. I'm gonna quickly do introduction to the event. I know that some of you were here yesterday, and you're probably gonna hear this for the third time, but I promise that I will short it a little bit. Okay, so the TSW happens every other year. So, thank you. Every other year since 2007 in Toronto. And the goal of these lectures is to bring people, spiritists from the world to help us here at Toronto to continue learning and improving our knowledge of spiritists. We also always have the latest research on spiritists. Okay, this year, the Joana Gianchi Spiritist Study Group and Toronto Spirit Society are organizing it. So it's a pleasure for both spirit centers in Toronto to be working together for this. The themes in the last year, since 2007, has been, in 2007, celebrating 150 years of the book, Spirit's book. In 2009, the theme was "And Life Goes On," what, how, and why communicating with spirits. 2011, we talked about mediumship, debates of concept and practice. 2013, the theme was mental health and emotional honesty. 2015, integrative care in medical practice. 2017, last year, live your life to the fullest. This year, the 7th Toronto Spirits Weekend, the theme is health, the perfect harmony of the soul. So TSS and JAWS are working together to offer you all a deeper discussion on the importance of moral, emotional, and behavioral education for a physical, ace, and spiritual healing. Our thoughts are a life force that generates emotions and feelings which will make us to react or not. It is extremely important to understand our conscious and unconscious state become behaviors, mental, emotional state. We will react in our bodies with profound metabolic unbalance resulting in several diseases. Actions from this life and past life are requested to be resolved for the sake of a better health. We have been to some lectures, so today we have 2 more with Cicero and Sonia, which I will introduce a little bit later. But this year, the TSW is bringing an innovation, which is the TSW for kids, where we have kids from 4 to 13 years old. We hope that at the end of these 2 days of events, each of the participants will have the opportunity to get to know each other more intimately. Understand that in the modern holistic therapeutic conceptions, the emotional states of the cellular fields are not separated by identified metabolic disorder, and the manufacturing of the human body will be confirmed by recent medical science studies and research. It's our pleasure to welcome you all to the 7th Toronto Spiritist Weekend. And before I turn to our speakers, I want to do this video that we shared yesterday, and we're gonna start with this video to share with all of you guys.
Our destiny is not disease, but health, which is a natural condition of life. And for that, we need to develop a proactive attitude towards life, seeking to understand our spiritual nature. But who are we? Where do we come from? And what will be our destination? These are all millennial questions which have plagued mankind throughout the ages, beckoning for answers. When we look at life, we often see it as a series of events. And we often say, we are born, we grow, a series of things happen. And then, inevitably, we die. So, death is a part of existence. But the question is, why is the process of death such a source of suffering for some and not for others? According to the World Health Organization, some of the main causes of death are cardiovascular disease, stroke, obesity, diabetes, and depression, to name a few. And medicine has been rapidly advancing in knowledge and technology to help minimize the causes of these illnesses. And yet, all the advances in technology appear insufficient to control diseases and establish well-being. Why are we still suffering? Have we looked deep into the cause of physical and mental disorders that afflict humanity? Scientific evidence has shown that physical and emotional stress are in the root of many illnesses, and that various spiritual approaches are beneficial in restoring health, potentiating conventional treatment, or even preventing disease. But why don't we use these approaches more often? Why are some people so skeptical? What is, after all, the role of the soul, or spirit, or consciousness, or mind? No matter what you call it, this is the essence of who we are, the human being, and that interacts and survives the physical body. Science and medicine are now able to prolong life by managing and treating illness like never before, but still has yet to cure many diseases, and still fails to promote the integral being encompassing mind, body, and spirit. But why? What or where is the missing link? And if there is a missing, where can one find it and unveil it and show the true root of our physical, emotional pain? The Spiritist Dr. Andrelli explains in the book Missionaries of the Light that we, a spirit, before incarnating, imprint our spiritual vibration on the genes that will form the new physical body, thus creating a new physiological organism. The World Health Organization has defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. In the medical spiritist paradigm, the human being is a three-dimensional structure composed of the physical body, the subtle body, or perispirit, and soul, or spirit. The main target, however, is the healing of the soul or spirit. It is therefore up to the immortal spirit to construct and maintain their own health. Spiritism extends this view and teaches that health is a state of complete biopsychosocial spiritual well-being because it takes into account these biological, psychological, social, and spiritual factors that influence the human being in its passage through early existence. The new era in medicine shall incorporate a spirit, mind, body approach in order to promote the integral health in its truest meaning. It will understand that we are more than a congregation of atoms. We are a spirit experiencing a temporary existence in matter And Spiritism offers the key to the relationship between body and soul, proving that one is constantly acting upon the other. This idea opens up a new field in science by demonstrating the possible true cause of certain diseases, thus making diagnosing and curing easier. In the new era in medicine, health practitioners shall address and be attentive to all aspects of their patient's physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Compassionate care can be an important tool of one's integral healing and practice. In the new era of medicine, health practitioners shall view the patient as a transcendental, immortal being, where the illness of today could be a result of a cause within the current or past life. The new era in medicine will not only treat the patient's physical body, but will integrate a multi-level approach to restore total health. The health practitioner will not only fix or help with the cure of the body, but also will be a servant of humanity, promoting true healing. As Dr. Rachel Naomi Lemon once said, helping, fixing, and serving represent three different ways of seeing life. When you help, you see life as good. When you fix, you see life as broken. But when you serve, you see life as whole. Fixing and helping may be the work of the ego, and service is the work of the soul. Let's embrace and usher in the new era.
All right. Much better. All right, so let me just do the first presentation up. Okay, so we're gonna have 2 lectures in a row, so different from yesterday. We're gonna not stop for question and answers because the 2 lectures will complement each other. So what we're gonna do is the question and answers will be at the end of the second lecture. Okay, so let me introduce the 2 speakers. First, we're gonna have Cicero. Knowledge. Dr. Cicero Torres Silva, Associate Professor of Cardiology and Biomedical Imaging, Chief Pediatric Imaging. He is current Vice President of the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association. And Dr. Sonia Doi is physician scientist, endocrinologist, current President of the following organization: Allan Kardec Spirit Society of Maryland, United States Spiritual Medical Association, and International Spiritist Medical Association. Resides in the United States of America for the past 30 years. All right, so let's go and invite Cicero to come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to the organizing committee. I'm very, very, very happy to be here. Seeing again very good friends and getting to know new friends. So in the next 15, let me put my monitor here. The next 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk about the impact of illness on family harmony. So we have 3 objectives for the next, let's say, the next hour. One is, the first is to understand the, can you hear me well at the very back? What about now? Can you hear me well? Yes. Okay. So the first objective, understanding the Spiritist view on afflictions that affect the family. Okay. And for that, we're going to look at 2 people. We're going to look at a little story of Leah and Sarah. Then we're going to see how illness affects family dynamics. And again, we're going to see another little history of Janet and Lisa. And finally, we're going to try to get some coping tools. And by that, we're going to see the family of John and Anna. So if you go to the dictionary and think about illness or disease, illness is a condition of being unhealthy in body or mind. Another definition, illness or again disease, is a condition that prevents the body or the mind from working normally. So okay, that's the dictionary definition there. And what about the Spiritist view? If you look at what is Spiritism from by Allan Kardec, you see a question that touches on that. So the question would be, why are there persons afflicted with incurable diseases, whereas others have every physical advantage imaginable? And then the spirits will reply, if we acknowledge the justice of God, we must acknowledge that these effects have a cause. If this cause does not lie in this life, it must lie in a previous one. The soul must have lived before, and it must have deserved the expiation. Okay, so now we're introducing a little concept of expiation here, linking to disease, to illness. If you go to Genesis, another passage there. By the law of the plurality of existences, the evils and afflictions of life are often expiations of the past. So again, touching on expiations there. And we submit in the present life to the consequence of faults that we have committed in an anterior existence. So consequence. Until we pay off the debt of our imperfections. Okay? So that would be, in a nutshell, the view of Spiritism on afflictions. And let's try to put that into some context. Let's see a story that comes from a book from Divaldo, Vivências do Amor em Família. We just changed the names to sound more Anglo. So here we're going to talk about Leah and Sarah. So Leah, she was the daughter of a rich farmer, and back in the day, you know, there were many arranged marriages, and she got one arranged marriage when she was 15. She got married to another healthy farmer, wealthy farmer, whom she didn't know. She got to see the gentleman, I believe, at their wedding, or perhaps just once before. Now, there was one problem. Her husband had severe mental disorder, and he would lock Leah, he would lock her up in their house, and he would abuse her. So she spent her marriage locked up in a house and being abused by her husband. So again, a husband with severe mental illness. She was allowed out of the house only twice. When her daughter got married herself, and when her daughter had a baby. Okay? And the second time when she's allowed out of the house, when the daughter has a baby, that's when the granddaughter, it's a baby girl, she's born, her name is Sarah, and that baby was born with a lot of physical deformities. It was really a shock to everybody who was in that delivery, to a point that the baby's mother got into this paranoid event, and she just throws the baby out of the window. Okay, she throws baby Sarah out of the window. Then Leah runs, grabs the baby, and runs away. Okay, runs away, never to be seen by her family. So she escapes from that husband. She escapes from that environment. And then she raises baby Sarah. She raises Sarah on the streets, you know, begging for money, surviving out of others' charities. They're like, whoa, what history, right? So what have they done to deserve that? So then you have the flip of the coin. So let's see what happened in the past of these two people. So both of them had a former life in Spain during the Inquisition. At the time, Leah was mother of Sarah. And both at that time used to accuse wealthy people to the Inquisition. And why would they do that? Because the Inquisition would get those people that were accused, they would lock them up. Remember what happened to Leah? They would lock up those families and they would torture those people. So imagine what would happen to the body of those people who were tortured. Remember baby Sarah, born with a lot of physical deformities? And then the Inquisition would take the possessions of the families and would divide with the person who was accused. So with that, Leah and Sarah became very, very wealthy on that lifetime. And since then, they have been gone through many expiatory reincarnations, okay, to pay, quote unquote, the debt that they got. Very important, they have been enduring those incarnations with resignation and with faith. And this was the last one. Okay, so this was the final one. Divaldo tells us this was the last incarnation that they were having, paying off those debts. So what are the morals of the story here? Again, thinking about Spiritist view of afflictions, thinking about illnesses. Today's tribulations and diseases oftentimes have origin in the past, right? And the family members of the family, the members of a family, they don't fall there by parachute. They are born in that family for a reason. And there's also this other passage from another book of Divaldo, SOS Familia, where it's a very nice quote on that. So it says, family is a group of spirits who are in need of readjustment and under a pressing commitment to reparation upon the incarnation. Okay. So that's our kind of our mindset, how we view illnesses, okay, how we view afflictions from a point of view of Spiritism. Of course, there's much more of that, but kind of in a nutshell. So knowing that, transitioning into how disease, how illness will affect family dynamics. So we know that disease can be very challenging for all in the family. We have a lot of stressors, right? Families undergoing, let's say, chronic illnesses, you have financial stressors, you have social stressors, you have physical stressors, you have psychological stressors. These stressors will often cause pain, right? These stressors will often cause, of course, physical pain for the person who is sick, and emotional pain for that person and for those around them. Emotional pain, let's say, in the form of fear, in the form of anger, for example. But very, very important, the distinction. All of that, yes, will cause pain, but does not need to cause suffering. Okay, okay, so what's the difference? So what's the difference between pain and suffering? So pain, and yesterday we saw very good definitions of pain. We saw 3 different types of pain. Here, let's take another context. Let's come from a blank screen, just another definition of pain that will work in the context of this talk, okay? So pain here, we're going to define as an unpleasant feeling, unpleasant sensation, unpleasant perception. Okay, so that's pain. It can be physical or emotional. Let's say that it's an input, meaning it comes from the outside in. Okay, it comes from the outside in. You put your hand onto fire, that's pain, right? It's from outside in. And it's healthy. You don't want to keep your hand on that fire, right? Now, from a Spiritist perspective, that pain may be a product of the law of responsibility, right? The law of cause and effect. And if you think about Leah and Sarah, all the pain they went through. And it's unavoidable. Okay? Law of responsibility, let's say this pain is unavoidable. Whereas suffering, it's a pattern of reaction that we have to that pain. Okay? Or let's say to that fear, to that anger, to those feelings that we're having. Therefore, it's an output, okay? It comes from us out, from inside out. And the suffering is an unhealthy pattern, an unhealthy attachment, entanglement to that pain, due to a poor coping mechanism. And given it's from inside out, again, coming from a perspective of the Spiritism, it's a product of the law of freedom, or our free will. Therefore, it's optional. And the suffering may lead into a lot of those dysfunctional family dynamics. Okay? So what do we mean by that? Let's try to put it into some context. Let's give another example. This example comes from the book Jesus, Modelo da Família. And again, we're changing the names. We're giving some Canadian names. Janet and Lisa here. So Lisa, she's 20, and she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia 2 years ago. And fibromyalgia gives you chronic, generalized by aches and pains. Now, she has had multiple flares, which have led into depression and anxiety. As a result of that, she dropped out of the college and returned to live with her mom. She's unemployed currently, and she's financially dependent on her mom. And she's really not compliant with her medical and her psych treatment. Now, she goes out on the weekends with her friends, and there she drinks heavily, and she engages in risky behaviors. So that's Lisa. And then we have Janet. Janet is Lisa's mom. Janet, as you can imagine, feels overwhelmed with all of that. Okay? Her daughter came back to live with her. Her daughter is not working. She has this chronic disease. She drinks a lot. So Janet is just overwhelmed. She's under financial stress. I mean, she was, catering for herself. Now she caters for herself and her daughter. Then, what she does? She demands that Lisa follows her medical and psych treatments and stop drinking. She demands, you will stop. Well, that doesn't quite work. Lisa just doesn't listen. And she acts out. Okay? Then what happens with Janet, mom? Janet feels powerless, that Lisa's not listening, and she gets increasingly anxious. Now she's no longer able to sleep at night. And then she has thoughts of kicking Lisa out of the home. Okay? But then she feels guilty. I really shouldn't be thinking about kicking my daughter out of home. And she keeps supporting Lisa's unhealthy lifestyle. And that kind of perpetuates that cycle, perpetuates that dysfunctional dynamic. So if we think about dysfunctional family dynamics and think about Janet and Lisa as an example, what can we do to break these cycles? Okay, what can we do to break these cycles? Let's think about some coping tools. And these are suggestions from thinking about, again, Spiritism and psychology, transpersonal psychology. First thing, reach out for help. Medical help, psychological help, social services. Okay, reach out for help. There's professionals there who are there to help us. And then we're going to focus on solving the problem with a mindset of compassion and understanding. A mindset of compassion and understanding. And what do we mean by that? Beautiful words, right? What do we mean by that? All right. So first, we're going to accept the other as is. Accept the other as they are. That's unconditional love. Then, thinking about the relationship with the person, Depending on the age of the person, and that applies to our children, for example, we're going to direct, guide, or advise, okay, depending on the type of relationship. What do I mean by that? Let's suppose you have a toddler. You have a 2-year-old who goes there and puts the finger, wants to put a finger into the outlet to see what electricity feels like. You're not going to talk with them. No, you're going to direct their hands out of that outlet, right? So we're directing those very young children. Now, let's suppose you have another scenario, a school-age child, a 9-year-old boy named Eric, like I have. And Eric comes from home, and you know, I know that Eric needs to do his homework, and I know that Eric needs to have a shower, and I know he needs to have dinner. So I can give him the option. Eric, do you want to have shower first, or do you want to have your homework first? You're going to do both. You're going to do both, but you have the choice. Which one do you want to do first? Okay, that's guiding. And then as you know, they get older, and especially with adults, then it's a very different relationship. With adults, all we can do is advise. We're not going to guide. We're not going to direct an adult. We're going to advise. Okay? Respecting their free will. Okay, more and more as they go, and with adults, always respect their free will. Remember, very important, and from this point of the lecture onwards, we'll be touching pretty much on this. We do not have the power to change other people. We do not. No matter what, we do not have power to change other people. Okay? We only have power to change ourselves. Ourselves. From now onwards, much of this talk will be about ourselves. Okay? So a very important thing, think about that dysfunctional family that we saw, that dynamic. We need to recognize our share of responsibility on a dysfunctional family dynamics. It's very easy, very tempting to think of a family and imagine everybody is beautiful and we have that black sheep. You know, like Rita Lee would say on her song, there's this black sheep and everybody else lives in peace in this family. Very, very easy to fall into that trap. But it's really not like that. We have our share. If the dynamic is not going fine, we have our share too. And all we can do is look at our responsibility there and change ourselves. Okay? And when we change ourselves, then we're going to teach by example. All right, again, change ourselves. So how do we change ourselves? What do we mean by that? So Jesus comes to the help. So as annotated by John, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So what do we mean by truth here? Okay, so we're going to talk about 2 dimensions of truth, just for definition, and then we're going to work in one of those dimensions. The one dimension is the universal truths. It's there for everybody, it's the same. It's God's laws, okay? The divine or natural laws. For example, the law of justice, love, and charity. Those are there for everybody, work the same for everybody on the same level. But then, each of us also have our inner truth. And what do I mean by the inner truth? And this is individual to each of us here, okay? This is our personal incarnation commitment, or personal or commitments, that reincarnatory contract that we heard yesterday, that we signed before we come here. Okay, we signed there, and there we were saying that we're going to work on one or more of one of our imperfections. Okay, so that's our inner truth. So the imperfection, or if you're really capable, more than one imperfections that are chosen to be enlightened into virtue. Just as an example, someone who's rebellious, like I am, turning into meekness. All right, that's our contract. So how do I realize what my contract is? So we're going to identify that through self-inquiry that will lead into self-knowledge. So thinking about changing ourselves through self-knowledge. So how am I going to know myself For example, as the question that was raised yesterday, how do I know, is this my ego? Is this my higher self? How do I know? Remember, first we said go for help. There are people there to help you. One of them is psychotherapy. Find a psych provider and work with them. Meditation. Meditation, it's something that also can, as you are meditating, those things just blow up, just come into your conscious. Through meditations, you start getting insights on your imperfections. Or you can use St. Augustine's method, as speaking on, as you can find on the Spiritist book. So remember St. Augustine, at the end of the day, he would think about every interaction he had during the day and anything that he could have done better, anything that was not quite right. Okay, so if you go through St. Augustine's method, the imperfection will become apparent as you're thinking about those conflicts that you went through. And then you become aware of, okay, so this is me. Didn't know that, but yeah, that's me. So that's an imperfection that is coming back again and again and again. So once you get that, you are free from self-deceit. Okay? So now you know your imperfection. That's great. Look at that. This is my imperfection. And what do I do with it? Okay, so next step. So what do we do with that? The invitation, and that's again the contract is signed, the invitation is to enlighten that imperfection into virtue. Okay, enlighten that into virtue. How do we do that? Again, there's different ways, but here we have a few suggested steps that we can take. First, this is great. We have already done on the step before, which is to recognize the imperfection. Okay, again, through either psychotherapy, meditation, some Augustine's method. So, all right, I recognize this is my imperfection. On Janet, for example, if you think of her, she probably has fear of confronting her daughter's behavior, right? She probably also has low self-esteem. She wants to be loved by her daughter. That's why she keeps feeding on her that unhealthy pattern of life that the daughter has. Once you recognize that, very important, self-acceptance. In Portuguese, acolhimento. Self-acceptance. That's what we are. That's okay. That's where we are in the step of the evolution that we are. Okay? Very important. Do not fall into the trap of guilt. Do not fall into the trap of justification. It's easy to look at that mom, Janet, and she then gets guilty. Oh, look at me. My daughter is now an alcoholic, and I'm the one who's paying for that. I shouldn't be doing that. Oh, that's bad. Oh my God. Don't fall into that trap or feeling guilty, especially because our, let's say, friends in the spiritual realm who are there wanting to not see us well will use that guilt against us. Okay, so don't fall into that trap of guilt. On the other hand, don't fall into that trap of justification. Yeah, but you know, and children are great on that, right? You catch them doing something wrong, they will always have an excuse, right? Yeah, but they are children, we are adults, so let's not start making up excuses to that behavior, okay? Let's not go to each of those extremes. Let's just accept, this is who I am. Once we recognize that, you also need to recognize that the suffering, that attachment, is not necessary. You don't, yeah, that's what you are, but we don't need to stay there. We really don't need to stay there. So we can change. So start thinking, can we change? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. But if we're thinking about changing, one other important step is to have the courage to renounce to what we call secondary gains, which are the advantages that we have by being in that, with that imperfection. For example, Janet, You know, she has that fear. Does she have any advantage of having that fear? Yeah, if you think of it, she avoids the conflict with her daughter, right? She has a fear, she doesn't want to touch on that, and yes, she is avoiding that. But with that, she has the peace as the word gives, as opposed to the Christ peace. And what's the difference? Yes, there's peace until I touch you, right? And then everything explodes. So that's not real peace. Like, it's really not. And then what about her low self-esteem? Is there any advantage of having low self-esteem? Well, if she keeps, again, feeding on that behavior of her daughter, she gets a daughter's approval, and everything is fine, right? So those would be kind of secondary gains that Janet has with that. So we need to have the courage to renounce to those. Once we commit to changing, all of that will go away. All right, so yes, we want to change. So we want then to reflect what virtue is going to enlighten that imperfection. For example, for Janet, she has fear. What do we think? What would be a virtue that would enlighten fear? What do we want to develop if we have fear? Yes, courage, right? So that's what she wants to focus on. She wants to focus on courage. What about low self-esteem? Low self-esteem. What do we want? What we want to develop? Self-love. Yes. So let's focus on those. Let's focus on the virtue that enlightens that imperfection. And embrace the virtue. Yesterday we were at the restaurant, you know, let's embrace that feijoada. Why not? Embrace the virtue. And let's make efforts to put the virtue into practice. Great. What does that mean? How do you make efforts to put the virtue into practice? So again, a few tips. It's not a recipe. Again, every case is different, but just a few tips. Before the conflict, what do I mean before the conflict? If you know you're going into that meeting with that coworker that you really want to punch on the face, before that, what can we do? Pray. Ask for strength to overcome that imperfection. Okay? Visualize yourself achieving that virtue. During the conflict, if you happen to have that aha moment during the conflict, which is hard in the beginning, by the way, most of the times when we're beginning, we only have that insight after the conflict. But with time, as we start practicing this, that starts shifting, and you start having that insight during the conflict. And then shifts more and more, and you start getting it before the conflict. During the conflict, if you're having that insight, watch and pray. Okay, watch and pray, like Jesus said. And what does that watch? The pray is, okay, we understand. What is that watch? In this context, watch is ourselves. Watch our own thoughts, our own actions. Okay, what are we doing in that? Listen to our conscience. Remember, that's where God's laws are. So before you say that, your conscience is already telling you, maybe it's better not say that right now. Listen to our conscience. And exercise the virtue. Okay? And exercise the virtue. Now have discipline, 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 right? And resilience and faith. After the conflict, again, many times it's only after that you are going to click to that. Or if you went through all of that, all right, now let's debrief. Between you and yourself, lock yourself in the bathroom. Okay, I have 5 minutes here. Let me debrief with myself. What happened here? First, don't demand perfection. Don't demand perfection. Okay? This is a daily, continuous process. If you demand perfection, if I demand perfection, we start wearing the masks that were mentioned on yesterday. We start thinking, oh yeah, I'm already perfect. That's right, when we're not. So don't demand perfection. We are not yet a perfect person. We're far from that. If we think about the scale of the spirits, we're closer to the beginning than we are from the end, right? So we are not yet a perfect person. But we're seeking to become better. Okay, that part is also very important. We're seeking to become better. Otherwise, again, we fall into that trap of justification. Okay? We want to learn from both our successes, and that's great. Let's celebrate. I didn't punch that person in the face. That's wonderful. But we also want to learn from our mistakes. And if we realize we did make a mistake, we want to accept, that's fine, I made a mistake, and let's repair it. With that, we're going to gradually enlighten that imperfection. Gradually. That's what Jesus said on the easy yoke and the light yoke. All right, so that's between us and ourselves, right? But remember, you are in that conflict with other people, or for make it simple, let's say other person, let's say one person, right? So all that we said until now pertain to between us and ourselves. What about between us and the other person? So how do we do that, that dialogue? Authenticity. Here comes Jesus to the help again. Let your yes be yes, and your no, no. Okay, that's annotated by Matthew. So we want to set clear rules and fair boundaries in the relationships. Clear rules and fair boundaries. We want to be kind, but assertive. But kind, but assertive. Okay? Kind and assertive. For example, if you think about Janet and Lisa, remember, at first Janet was saying, you are not going to drink, you're not going to do that. That doesn't lead into anything. So we want to be kind and assertive. So Janet can come to Lisa and say, look, you need to be compliant with your medical treatments and seek help to quit drinking. If you don't, that's your choice, that's your free will, but I'm not going to support you financially anymore. It's easy. I mean, it's not easy. It's but easy on paper at least. And why? It's going to be this way because I am making efforts to be this way. Because we are striving to become a better family that is kinder and more respectful. Authenticity. That's great. So what if you do all of that and the other does not respect those boundaries that you're trying to place? Then what? Here comes Jesus to the help again. Parable of the sower. We're going to sow seeds of love, regardless of how others will respond, regardless. The germination and the fruits will depend on where those seeds are going to fall. They will depend on the aptitude of each of us. And the other person might not be ready to change. We need to be realistic. In a planet of trials and expiations, chances are not everyone is a fertile soil. And guess what? Probably we are not fertile soils either. We cannot coerce others into becoming that fertile soil. Like Janet was trying at first, you are going to do this. We cannot coerce other adults or teenagers, I guess. Otherwise, you come with this prepotency, and that becomes powerlessness, okay? And that leads into anxiety. Remember, Janet had a lot of anxiety. You also cannot save other people from suffering. Remember, at the end of the day, you're going to be kind, you're going to be loving, but at the end of the day, it's their choice, it's their free will. If you go into this mentality of, oh, I am the savior of this family, that will feed into this dysfunctional family dynamics. Sowing those seeds of love. Remember, each person will become a fertile soil over time through evolution. That's the law of progress, right? We're always evolving. On the other hand, each one have their own time to change. Yes, we're all evolving, but we also have the law of freedom. That evolution will come either through love, through pain, or through suffering. But again, remember, God does not punish. The invitation is always love. Love is always the first option for that evolution. We're going to be seeding those seeds of love because they are imperishable. What do we mean by that? Even if that person is at that moment refractile to us, those seeds will remain as an energy reverberating around the other's essence. Remember, we all have our essences, and those seeds will be there. And they will germinate when that person becomes conscious of their own spiritual commitments, their inner truth. And sooner or later they will, because again, remember, we are progress, and there's the law of progress. They will, at some point, they will. And there's many other seeds, right? It's seeds of love, resignation, meekness, tolerance, compassion, and work. Throughout the process, pray. Visualize that family member well. Project positive and balanced energy. Rather than, no. Project, make efforts to project positive and balanced energy. Do the gospel at home. That helps. Do it daily if needed. In the face of complex problems, there will be some types of problems that there's not much we can do. We'll see on another example in a few minutes. Trust the divine providence. God He is much more intelligent than we are. He's much more loving than we are. God knows what God is doing, right? So trust God. All of that will create this positive psychosphere around ourselves and the other person. So let's give an example. These are fictional characters on how we could put that into practice. So this is a family of 4. Kevin is a 10-year-old. He was diagnosed 2 years ago with oppositional defiant disorder. What does that mean? So he often loses his temper. It's pretty bad. It's not just saying, it's pretty bad. He really, really loses his temper. He gets very, very angry and very resentful. He is arguing with the parents all the time. He will often throw tantrums when he's asked to do his chores. He's always blaming everybody else for his mistakes, and he often gets into fights at school. Okay. Now, Kevin is on psych meds, but this year he has much more homework than he had in the past. And when he gets at home, his tantrums are getting much more frequent and much more intense. So that's Kevin. But wait, there's more. There's Leo. Leo is 3. And Leo was born with microcephaly due to Zika virus. So Leo has severe intellectual and cognitive deficit. He's near blind, he's deaf, he's nonverbal, he's constantly crying. All the time, Leo cries. He has severe motor deficit, meaning he's bedridden. All right, what children should have, right? So then we have Anna, who is the mother in this family. She had to quit her job as a social worker to care for Leo. And she feels life is not fair. She has a hard time accepting her children. She really feels embarrassed by Kevin's tantrums and Leo's condition. And it got to a point that she no longer invites anyone to their family, to their home. And then there's John. John is the father in that family. He works as a police officer. He has a lot of stress at work, as you could imagine, police officer. And then he gets home and he has his children. So he feels very, very angry with Kevin's tantrums. In the past, he has even once lost his temper and beat Kevin. And he feels very anxious and impotent when he hears Leo's constant crying, to a point that he once he said, that's it. He left his house and he went to sleep at a friend's home, at a friend's. So that's that family. So let's try to apply some of those coping skills. Okay, so they went and they seek help. So they start doing family therapy with a psych provider. They go to the Spiritist Center and they get fraternal help there. They take the children, both children, to the children's group. Like we heard last week, first they talk to the evangelizadores and they prepare the environment, so they take the 2 children there. They do the gospel at home. All of this gives them a little bit of more emotional balance, so they can stop, breathe a little bit, and take the next steps. And what are the next steps? Anna starts meditating. And through meditation, she becomes aware of that her feelings of embarrassment really come from excessive pride that she has and excessive arrogance that she has. So yes, there's those 2 children. Yes, that's pretty sad. That's pretty hard to work with. But remember, each of us have our share in the dynamics. And Anna's share was what she needed to, what she had signed up to overcome in this incarnation was pride and arrogance. John starts using St. Augustine's method. And he didn't take a genius when he was looking at his day, how he was going to recognize that he was very angry. So his main issue was anger. Then both see, so that's what is in fact that's the invitation to be enlightened into virtue. Those were the limitations, and they accept the invitation to change. Anna embraces humility, and John embraces meekness. So that's between them and themselves, right? Both are going to make efforts to put that into practice, learning from the successes and from their mistakes. All right, so that's between them and themselves. What about between them and the others? With Kevin, remember the tantrums? They're going to set boundaries for Kevin. Kevin only gets to play after he finishes his homework. Those boundaries are firm, no matter how much tantrum Kevin throws. But again, they're placed with love and compassion. Now with Leo, there's not much they can do, right? If you think of it as to mitigate that. So they trust the divine providence. They pray for what? For strength for themselves. Strength to care for you. All right, so in sum, when we're faced with illness in the family, let's not run away from those challenges. Let's not try to solve those with force or alone. Remember, there's help out there. Let's use medical and spiritual resources. Let's focus not on the problem. Let's not get attached to that pain. Let's not develop suffering. Let's focus on solving the challenge with this mindset of compassion and understanding, striving to learn and changing ourselves. What can I change on myself in all of this turmoil? Then we change ourselves through the self-knowledge. Remember meditation, psychotherapy, St. Augustine. And with the other, we're going to set fair boundaries. And if they're not responding, we're going to sow seeds of love, recognizing most of us are not yet fertile soil. Watch and pray, always prayer, always there. Trust on divine providence. So with that, we're going to take peace. It could be a turmoil around us. Everything could be falling around us. But we are going to get Christ's peace as opposed to the peace that the world gives us. We're going to take Christ's peace with that. All right, so that's it. So hopefully by now we understood the Spiritist view on afflictions that affect the family. We looked at Leah and Sarah, how illness affects the family dynamics. We looked at Janet and Lisa, and we learned some coping tools. We looked at that family of John and Hannah. And these are the references. Thank you.
just change the presentations.
While Marcio is changing the presentations, I would like to thank all the volunteers for all the love that we were received with, and I would like to publicly thank Eleni for our interpreter who had done a hard work to do the translations today, in preparation for the translations today. Thank you. And since after the presentation, after the Q&A, Sister and I had to rush to the airport. I'd like to leave my love, my gratitude, and like hugging all of you before in advance. So my talk today is kind of, I almost don't need to do this because you're going to see a lot of overlap with the previous lectures. And the good thing about being the last speaker is that we were preceded by brilliant speakers, wonderful lectures, and you're going to see that I will frequently refer, this was already addressed, this was already addressed. So I almost don't need to say much. Since we are all in the same, following the same line of knowledge, which is Spiritism, we only have a little bit different complementary things and different views, but the main theme is the same. So we're going to talk a little bit about the family conflicts and health. The topics, a little bit about family circle, causes of family conflicts, impact of on physical and mental health, the mechanisms of stress and disease, role of the spirit, and means to reduce the impact of conflicts on health. So this is a picture of family, and we all would like to be like that all the time. Embracing everyone with a smile, happiness, and many families can do that for most of the time. And for some families, that image only lasts that smile, take a click, and then after the picture, everyone goes into their own way. So we have, and again, this was already addressed, we incarnate in the best setting possible for our spiritual advancement. Setting meaning family members, social status, the place where we were born, the physical structure of our body, and our health status. André Luiz in the book Respostas da Vida, which is not translated, so Answers from Life, says the difficult person in your life, meaning a member of the family or a worker, whoever, is the best the divine providence found for your own advancement. So we have to reflect on that. Heredity. So now sometimes you think, wow, why this person is in my family? Yeah, we have to remember that even genetics, heredity, is directed by principles of spiritual nature. And if we want to learn more about this, please read Missionaries of the Light. And you see how much work the spirit world does to direct the perfect set of genes for us to be born and to undergo the difficulties that we may have. Within the family circle, we find everything that we need for our spiritual growth. We find spirits that are linked by affection, so there's not always all people that we're going to have problems with. We've also find people who are linked by affection through several incarnations, and they come together in that family. They have a role. to work together and help others, help some of the adversaries that's going to be born there, because that's the work that we have to do for forgiveness. Vanessa talked about that yesterday. Forgiveness, expiation, Cicero already talked about that, and reparation. We have to do all three. We don't stop in forgiving. We have to reparate. So the adversaries sometimes let us feel that unexplained rejection, animosity. Why? Sometimes we see this like workplace. Never met this person before, but I feel uneasy. So, but wouldn't it be easier to know who is who when we are in a family? Who was this person in my past incarnations? So this question was raised by Antonina in the book, and here I put it in Portuguese because the book's not yet, as far as I know, translated to English. Entre a terra e o céu, between earth and heaven. If you go into Google, there are a lot of books that have the opposite name and they're not Spiritist, so be aware of that. Wouldn't it be easier to know who is who? So Antonina, who is an incarnate person, but during sleep, the spirit is free and goes to the spirit world and is learning and working at the same time. So she asks this same question. And Clarencio, who is the mentor, who is clarifying, bringing, helping these people to understand better, he says, remembering the past would put you in contact with both the best and worst people. And with no doubt, we don't have yet the balance. Of course, he is on a higher level, but we incarnate. Don't have yet the balance and pure love, typical of the superior spirits. And he continues to say, without the transitory forgetfulness, we would be unable to receive in our heart the adversary from the past, to regenerate him or her, regenerating ourselves. So it's double work. As we work to regenerate, to help, to fix that problem, we are working on ourselves, like all the speakers already said, and Cicero just said, the work is for us. It's not just trying to change the other. The work is for us. So I put a list here of family conflicts just for the sake of discussion, and I'm sure you could bring a lot more here, but I just put some for us to kind of think a little bit. Some causes of family conflicts, moving. I think if I ask for people to raise hands here, most of us have moved from our countries to here, we moved from one place to another, and it's moving sometimes is because one member of the family comes for advancing studies or work, and the whole family comes together. Sometimes the whole family is not prepared for that. So you have to confront different language, different culture. That creates a turmoil in the family. Sometimes with kids going to school, I don't understand this language, and my friends, where are my friends? So a lot of turmoil raised from there. Divorce and separation. Sometimes we see that this is a very friendly process, and sometimes not so friendly. Even when it's friendly, there's a disruption in that structure. Sometimes the disruption is already going from some time, but there's always like some disharmony in the family circle. That depends on the process.
Financial issues, loss of job creates a lot of conflict. Not much of conflict, but difficulties that you have to overcome. If a person is, especially if he's the head of the household, it goes without a job for too long, then he starts facing what we're gonna do, how we're gonna survive. Addictions, that's a big problem, and Cicero already talked about some of them. All sorts of addictions, that brings a lot of problem in the house. How we deal with that, how we deal with the person and all the other members of the family, how they're going to kind of accept that or help. And many times the addictions will create the next thing, abuse. And that becomes a worse problem. Verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And when these abuses happen in the family, within the family, it's much harder for the person to come out and accept or verbalize or look for help, because they are afraid what's going to happen to this person in my family. How I'm going to say that I've been abused within my own family. So that creates a lot of problems. Nowadays, even healthcare professionals have been instructed to kind of perceive when there's a case of abuse and try to bring that out to help the person. Because many times, if you act in time, you are saving a life. Discrimination, sexual orientation within the family creates a lot of conflicts. Sometimes it's well accepted, sometimes at least one member of the family doesn't want to know about it, rejects, and it creates also problems. Fight among family members, so they cannot be together because there's a fight. So sometimes you are not even in the matter of the fight, but you become involved because you want to protect others. Technology addiction, wow. I think we all know about this, right? Everybody is on the dinner table and each one of them is with their cell phone. They cannot connect. So that is a problem that as we educate ourselves, we need to, and I'm sure, you know, in the evangelization and all that, we are trying to educate our kids not to be so addicted. Using it as a tool is good, but too much is too bad, is bad. Lack of communication. Many times I see people that say, well, how you don't know that? Well, you never told me. And the husband brings one day flowers to the wife, and the wife said, oh, how come? Maybe, you know, you're doing this because you're guilty of something? No, I'm just bringing. Yeah, you never showed that affection or that. So communication is important. We sometimes think that everyone else reads our mind, guesses what we want, and that's not apparent. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about lack of quality time with family. And the person says, well, but I spend the whole weekend with my family. Yeah, so what do you do? Well, I'm watching game while my wife is reading books, while my kids are playing. No, family time, good time together, having activities together, planning something together so that parents are together with the kids build connection. So that creates problems later usually. So all this creates tension. And not even to talk about spiritual influences. While we are tormented and with all these afflictions, our level of vibration goes down. And what happens? We make connections. And if you're so angry at somebody because of this or that, that's when you make connections. And if you make connections with spirits of inferior vibrations, you're going to be even worse. So we have to be mindful. Kardec in the Spirit's book already tells us that we all have that little kind of level of mediumship. You don't need to be a real medium, but you all have that perception. And we can all make connection with spirits. And of course, there are all the good spirits that are willing to connect with us. But at the same token, there are the spirits of lower level that are there and will connect as long as we are in their level of in their wavelength. So the connection is established by affinity, by the wavelength that we are vibrating. Therefore, the question is, with whom we establish connection. So in the midst of affliction, we kind of lose balance, and we need to regain balance. We need to elevate our connection. So family disharmony affects health of family members at various degrees. Some are more resilient, others are not. And we see as a consequence physical injury, violence, that is to the self, to the person, or others in the members. For example, addiction-related diseases. Those are physical diseases, physical injury. A person who is an alcoholic and ends up by having liver cirrhosis, pancreatitis, with mental disorders, with sexual transmitted diseases in those who are addicted to sexual practices. Anyways, there's so many of these physical injuries. But what we're going to talk more about today is the stress causing emotional and physical damage to our health. So what is stress? Stress is the brain and body response to any demand. Everything that takes you out of that kind of zone of comfort, takes you out of there, it instinctively activates the mechanisms of stress. So is stress always bad? Not always. When is it good? There are positive effects of stress. Thanks to stress, we can evade when there's a threat. So it's also good when, as a natural response, I have to prepare this lecture and it's tomorrow and I haven't done it. So when I'm stressed, I can act fast. My heart beats faster, my respiration rate increases, sweating, muscle tension, oxygen consumption, and brain activity are all accelerated. Blood sugar and blood pressure also increases, but this is all so that I can act fast. And these are supposed to be a fast reaction. It's a transitory reaction so that I can act. There is an alarm sounding, and that helps me to flee and save my own life. So those are the good effects. But there are harming effects when this is not just an acute event. If stress is prolonged, if stress becomes a chronic event, then we are going to see damage. So chronic effects, mental and organic disorders, and the degree of severity will depend on individual responses. Some people are more resistant, they know how to work with that conflict, especially when we know, when we have tools like Spiritism that we learn so much, we kind of know better how to handle these situations and avoid too much damage. So here I put a list of some of the mental disorders associated with chronic stress, persistent headache, anxiety, depression, panic attack, sleep disorders, memory, and concentration impairment, but also physical. We noticed that, for example, I am too stressed because of work or something, and I have frequent cold. I catch cold very frequently. I fall sick frequently. That's because our immune system is suppressed during chronic stress. Menstrual alterations, reduction of libido, diabetes mellitus. Stress is one of the major factors that imbalances diabetes, digestive diseases problems, so many of them heart disease, eating disorders, bulimia, anorexia, which sometimes just ends up in weight gain or pathologic loss of weight. So here I'm just going to go a little bit into mechanisms just to give an overview that stress is the mechanism is it goes through the neuroendocrine system. So the endocrine system here is shown in a very simplistic way through the glands, and the master gland is in the brain, is the pituitary gland that commands the thyroid, the adrenal gland, ovary, testicles, and this pituitary gland, which is the master gland, is in direct connection with a brain structure that's the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is in the area of the brain that is responsible for emotions. And we're going to talk, the pituitary, the master glands, produces some of the hormones that are listed here. So this is not important for us today, but one important hormone here is the ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is the hormone that will stimulate the adrenal glands. In the adrenal glands, when it's always producing cortisol and adrenaline in our daily life every day in all situations. But during a situation of stress, there's an incredible peak of these two hormones, the cortisol and adrenaline. So they are responsible for the stress response. But you see here also the pineal gland. And the pineal gland was not part of the endocrine system until kind of recent. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about, but it's very important and especially important for us here. So I'm going to go a little bit into the pineal gland that secretes a hormone called melatonin. The first mention of the pineal gland in detail was by Claudius Galenus, way 132 to 210 before Christ. And he was the one who, looking at this gland, called it pineal because he found that the shape was similar to a pine cone. And it is a very small, it's like a grain of rice, 5 to 8 millimeters is the size. It's like a grain of rice. He was the first to describe it, but then only, like 1600s, René Descartes came with a more defined, as he thought, function for the pineal gland. And he said that he thought that this was the seat of the soul, responsible for mechanisms that regulate the precise function of the human body and the manifestations of passions. Passions for him was what we call emotions. So he made a connection, especially when there were mental dysfunctions. His theory is that the mental dysfunctions was kind of coming from the pineal gland that dysregulate the body response. So his idea populated the 16th, 17th century, but in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, this faded out. The idea became again, no, all the disorders are somatic disorders. There's nothing to do with emotions, none of that. Here's the cause, I can see the cause is the liver, so therefore there's this. So there was an idea, there was a somatization of all the diseases, including mental disorders. So they found, oh, it's because this hormone goes up, this hormone goes down, blah, blah, blah. So this was the idea in the 19th century. Until 1958, when melatonin was discovered. Then, oh, melatonin, and then they found all the functions, how this worked. They said, oh, this is a hormone-like. So pineal gland becomes then part of the endocrine system. But in Missionaries of the Light, Chico Xavier, through the message of André Luiz, had already told us that the pineal gland secreted a psychic hormone. And here is psychic like mental, right? Or power units, which act positively on generating energies. This is like a translation of the Portuguese, which is written in a maybe a little bit different meaning. But the important part of this, for us as Spiritists, is very interesting that now this truth that the spirits told us before science could realize it or could show it, this comes publicly into the scientific publications in a work that was published by Giancarlo Lucchetti and other, as you see here. It was published in 2013, specifically showing to the scientific, bringing to the scientific literature that there's a discovery, scientific discovery, that was predated by spirit information. So this was very important for us when we want to show that the knowledge that spirits brought came much earlier than what science can bring, and we don't know if we're going to see them during this lifetime. So scientists in this, so that was 58. Around 10 years later, in the 60s, mid-60s, scientists discover the regulation of melatonin synthesis by light. So now the impulses of light through our eyes regulate the pineal gland to secrete more or less melatonin. So how this happened, by their studies, they have shown that this impulse of light goes through the nervous system to the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is works as a transductor of these impulses, regulating mental disorders. So this was a breakthrough where we see a link between the hormone and mental disorders. And again, the knowledge predated the spirits in 1958 when in the work Evolution into Worlds, we read about the pineal gland, which is also called the epiphysis. And André Luiz tells us the pineal gland is the energetic core of subtle sensations and emotions that are translated into a diverse panel of mental states. So they are already telling us that in 58. And he tells that the fundamental role in the manifestations of conscious and unconscious mediumship is also a role of the pineal gland. And I brought this up also because remember when, way in the beginning, I said that in the complex, there is interference, there's influence from other spirits. Remember this because we're going to show how that goes through the same channel of our own spirit. So while the science brought up the effect of melatonin and all that during to the mental disorders to influence mental status and mental disorders, we have learned that in much earlier than 58. So melatonin, the hormone, is a mediator of stress and mental disorders. And this was discovered because now there's scientific work showing reduction of melatonin associated with increase in cortisol. So there is a connection between melatonin from the pineal gland and cortisol that was stimulated by the pituitary gland, the adrenal gland. And there's an interrelation between the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system and the pineal gland. So this was showing much later in 79. And the other interesting point is that they discovered that there's receptors for pituitary hormones in the pineal gland. So there's a clear interaction. So that ascertains that the pineal gland really belongs to all this endocrine network. And much later, there's some work that have done showing that there's a correlation between melatonin with schizophrenia, bulimia, and anxiety. And I would like to mention also Dr. Candace Burt, who did a lot of work with, she was discovered opioid receptors in 73. But then after that, she kind of distanced herself from the laboratory, and she started to work on these neuropeptides as messengers of emotion to the body through receptors. So she called that molecules of emotion, and she published a book in 1997 with that name, Molecules of Emotion. She was an incredible person. After this, her laboratory work, when she distanced herself from there, she became a much more spiritual person. And Andrea Luiz tells us mind is in the command of emotions. Under the command of the mind, all cells, tissues, and organs of the physical body are integrated by the nervous system in their functions, and their functions are controlled by hormones. So here is Andrea Luiz telling us all that we told you so far in a small paragraph. There is an interconnection from the mind. So now where's the mind? Is in the spirit. So now we are bringing an element that science has not brought to this whole system. We're bringing the spirit. So the interaction in spirit body is established by the mind, just that's the commander that transmits the impulses of thought to the brain, the physical brain, via the perispirit. So this is like a quantic interaction. I'm going to talk about quantum physics. And now bring us to talk about the perispirit. The perispirit manages the functional activities of the physical organs through the energetic chakras, for a better name, the centers de força, or energy centers. That is what in the Hindus call chakras. The energy centers, stellas and release, are like a vehicle of electric cells that we can define as electromagnetic field in which thought circulates in a closed circuit. So imagine our thoughts generated by the spirit coming to our physical brain, connecting through the perispirit, circulating, making connections through the whole body. This is much wider than just trying to explain through the endocrine system. Now, the ground center or coronal center in the central region of the brain, in the region that is equivalent to diencephalon in the physical brain, represents the highest expression of the physical body due to the high potential of radiation. And that's the seat of the soul, stellas and release. This is these two books, you can read a lot about the perispirit and all, of course, Kardec book. And here I put the flower of lotus because that's how the Hindus represent the crown center, vibrating all the energies. And Darwin says the crown center provides all essential electromagnetic resources for keeping the organism stable. The ground center expresses the forces of the incarnated spirit together with the spiritual influences received and command the other energy centers. Thus, depending on the vibrations received, this center will produce an energy that balances or imbalances the physical body. So I underline there the spiritual influences because it is the same center, it is the same part of our perispirit that brings in to the body thoughts that we process as spirits in this body, together with the influences that we allow to be mixed with our thoughts. So we have to be really careful. The product, the end product, will be a summatory of these two things. So this is a representation of everything that we said so far. The spirit is what actually receives all that disharmony from family conflicts, but then it goes through the perispirit to be manifested in a body. So now we know about, what may cause some of the causes of family conflict. We know the process. We know that it causes tension, how we deal with it, management. And, already heard a lot from our previous speakers. And again, I don't have to say much, it's just going to re-emphasize balanced mind. The human being is essentially the spirit who is its organizer. So the spirit is the organizer of the whole human being. The physical body is just a component of it. Therefore, human beings are inevitably the result of what they think, they speak, and they do. So, body is the result. This, I again put the reference there in Portuguese because, as far as I know, has not been translated to English, but it's a beautiful book that gives us a lot of explanations and things that we can meditate about. Atualidade do Pensamento Espírita, by Franco. Through thoughts, the spirit generates harmony or disharmony that is expressed in the body or emotions. So it's our thought. We have to be attentive. The balanced mind alters the afflicting mechanism of suffering, changing the tormenting scenario into areas of harmony and health. But we need to learn how we balance our minds. We need to learn to reach that status. So how we reconcile with family conflicts to be like that most of the time? Forgiveness. Dr. Anzalone talked about forgiveness yesterday. Very, very important. So if we don't forgive, we cannot accept, and it turns things much more difficult in the family. Patience, tolerance, faith, and hope. Again, I'm rephrasing what has been said before. Resignation. And when we talk about resignation, we have to remember all that I was talking about in the beginning. We are in this family not by chance. There is a purpose. There's an objective. There's a need. And the need is merely for ourselves. Remember when Andrali said, the difficult person in your life is the best that the divine providence found to help you. So resignation, we have to understand that. And love, of course. So for the most difficult, in the most difficult situations, we have to bring love into action. Love so that we can look at that person as a spirit, as a brother or sister who is now undergoing very difficult struggle within themselves. If we cannot deal with this by ourselves, we have to look for help. And Cicero and others already talked about this. So we look for spiritual assistance if we have our spirit center so good, because we can get fraternal assistance, passes, prayers, study of spiritism. And I put there study of spiritism because it's not only going there, having passes, fraternal assistance, fluidic water, go home. If we don't study, we don't understand all these mechanisms, why is all this happening. As we understand, as we read Kardec, and little by little, we start to understand that this has a much wider objective. We start to think, we start to work together and say, I understand now. So I can work onto myself to be able to handle the situation. So we need to study. I want to just say meditation. And again, I just put yoga there for one reason. Yoga as a practice usually enforces breathing, deep breathing, right? Meditation also, some practice use that. And this is just interesting because the deep breathing is one way that we stimulate the vagal tonus. And the vagal tonus balances the sympathetic stimuli that increases all the stress hormones. So the vagus tonus help to balance that, the parasympathetic system. So it's one mechanism that it's sometimes it's important for us to understand why how is this happening? How is this helping in some way? But I also want to say something about passes, because we all, especially, those to the Spiritist centers, have the feeling the benefit, and we know as we study the benefits of passes. But there's a scientific work that was done in Brazil by a group of Spiritists in a hospital with children, premature children. So they were born prematurely. They were in the ICU, and of course, there's a lot of distress during that phase. And everybody knows that the heart rate goes up, the respiratory rate goes up, the cortisol is elevated. So they brought people who applied passes there with a control group and all that. I don't have time to go too much into detail in that. But the answer, the final result was that they proved a significant difference, reduction in the respiratory rate of these kids. Now, the kids are not aware of that. They are premature, they're in the ICU, right? So this is another proof that the benefits of passes in these children. Cortisol came down and all that. So it was an interesting thing that came out just to say how passes can help us in stress situations. And prayers, of course. And then some other changes in our lifestyle, health, eating, exercise, voluntary work, charity. There's a lot of things that we have evidence already that charity, voluntary work is it's beneficial for all of us. Professional assistance and supporting groups. So we have here a lot of things that we can use to help manage stress. But to finish, I want to bring this up, and this is in the book that I mentioned, Perturbations, Perturbações Espirituais, which is also not translated. But it's beautiful in this book, really. Bring us back to reflect on how powerful is our Spiritist center. And by Divaldo, by the mediumship of Paulo Franco, Filomeno Miranda tell us the Lord's house is a hospital for all torments and needs of the human beings. The Spiritist center can attend to both the incarnate and discarnate. There are beautiful cases there when you see the incarnated receiving assistance and the spirit that is linked to that, person and bringing a lot of disturbances to the person is helped and assisted. So the Spirit Center is an emergency center for the afflictions of the soul and of the body, providing inner harmony to the patient. Spiritism as a consoler, after wiping the tears of those who were suffering, equip them with values to proceed with dignity, to construct a better future, and to experience well-being. That's why I mentioned that we need to study Spiritism, because of this. Otherwise, we have the tears wiped through assistance, but we are not equipped with what we need for future. Thank you. So now Cicero will join me and we're gonna have a question and answers. If you have any questions that we can answer.
Someone told me to bring you this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you familiar with the Emotion Code, a book by Dr. Bradley Nelson, or also the limbic balance method, the LBM, that uses muscle testing to locate blockage of energy and uses magnets to release it. Have you heard of it?
No, I have not.
My question is, if you say that we carry the pain, the inflictions of previous incarnations, so if you, whatever you have done in the past, you are here to clear that out from this body. There is no way to release that. I have to go through the process and do something.
No, and this was also, I think, yesterday, the speakers yesterday talked a little bit about this, but it's very important to know, I'm sure we talked about this, that we, through our, depending on our attitudes in this incarnation, you can build credits to reduce any debts that you brought from past. So what are the tools that you have? Doing good, working with love, productively, and not always complaining about anything that, you know, it is the trouble that you're facing today. So it depends on your attitude. And there is like, just to illustrate, there is a Spiritist example of that when a person loses a finger and you know, the Spirit says, yeah, you should not even complain because you were supposed to lose the whole arm. But you did so much that now it's only a finger. So there's always ways to reduce, and we are surrounded by opportunities to work, and sometimes we don't see them. So we don't have to resort to other practices. Of course, they help, but as everybody said from yesterday, the work for ourselves. We have to look into ourselves and think, what is there that I can change?
Yes, I feel that the work is ours, and that reminds me of a lecture that I once saw online, and I'll paraphrase that here. Here we are a number of people, perhaps a little bit less than 50, and we're watching lectures on how to improve ourselves. If the TSS and Joanna has said, hey, we're gonna, rather than doing this, we're gonna bring a medium that is gonna heal people. We will need to get the Sky Dome. What's the new name for the Sky Dome again? Not new anymore? Rogers. We will need to hire the Rogers Center, right? To how many people would go in? Because we tend to try to find a way that other people are going to solve our issues, and it's not quite like that.
Did we respond to your question? Did we respond to your question?
Hi. My question is, has anybody ever compared, let's say, Spiritism with Buddhism? Because it looks so similar, right? Has anybody ever properly compared that?
And I'm sorry, who are you?
I'm Alex Tavares. I'm a child psychiatrist, originally from Brazil, but here in Ontario for 2 years.
And a very, very good friend of mine.
So you want to answer?
I don't know if anyone has compared in a scientific way, but I see a lot of resemblances. On a personal trajectory, I see a lot of resemblances. I've been to a Buddhist retreat, 1 week Buddhist retreat on meditation, and from personal experience, I see a lot of resemblances. And I know you studied acupuncture when you were in Brazil as a medical student, and what you see in acupuncture is what we see in the past is all the meridians. We think about the perispirit with the lines of forces.
I have some friends who are Buddhists, and I know that there are different types of Buddhists also, from Korea, from Japan. But in essence, their philosophy is very similar to ours, especially, for example, in the law of cause and effect. They have the same approach. They have a little bit different perspective on reincarnation, though.
And also my understanding is that some Buddhists, depending on the tradition that you follow, there's not even a concept of God. There's no God as such. Whereas in Spiritism, we firmly believe that there is a God. That might be one difference.
Anyone else?
I'm going to speak up about this. I have a curiosity about melatonin. We saw the importance that it has. It was very nice to hear about that on our mind. And I read on a non-spiritual article that we can only produce, because we see on the counter pharmacies that we can buy melatonin. Does it really work? Does it make sense that they sell it?
I don't want to go into that because that's something that's not, I don't want to go into whether they should sell or whether we should buy or not. I can only say that melatonin is physiologically regulated in our body, has an effect, it's regulated especially by light. So that's why many people have the depression when, during winter time and all that. So in some cases, people think that there is a reduction in the melatonin that you're producing, and you need melatonin, and that helps to regulate your sleep pattern or the way you respond. So I cannot go more than that. I only know what, the role, physiological role, and what they have discovered right now. There's some work that they are still being done. That's not set in stone, but they're still being done and finding some correlations between the levels of melatonin and some mental disorders like schizophrenia and others. But this is still early steps of research that they are finding. And for us, Spiritists, that's interesting because Andrea Luis has already said that there is a connection with mental disorders. So we don't know yet whether there is a proof that if you take melatonin as a medication will help in this or that. Still too.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
Thank you all.
All right. I know that Sonia and Cicero would like to talk more, as well Mark and Vanessa. I'm sure you all would like to hear more about all the topics, but as a moderator, I have to be the one stopping, and I apologize for that. Before we close, Angela will say some words.
Thank you, our volunteers, for contributing with time and having done a wonderful job helping the flow and outflow running smoothly. Thank you for being so friendly, helpful, and professional. Thank you in turning this event into reality, inspiring confidence in our organizations. This event could not have been successful without the dedication and hard work of people like you. We want to thank you in kind sponsors who provided support to the TSW. José Francisco Schuster from the CHIN Radio Canada, Deborah Duarte, pelo second year she's providing the natural beauty of the flowers for us. Thank you to our attendees who made this event become a reality. Having you attending this event is a real pleasure for all of us. We hope that at the end of the 7th TSW, we have contributed to expand your knowledge and understanding of quality of life, which goes beyond the biological, psychological, and social aspect of one's life, and that the spiritual domain shall be considered new territory for expansion of the traditional health concept. would you like to ask you everybody to sit over here? Would you like to have a picture with everyone? Please move that side. You guys two can come on this side. Okay. Pode balançar a mão, fica à vontade. Thank you, guys. Nós vamos pedir o Marco agora para fazer a oração final para a gente.
Inglês, né? Inglês?
You go in English and Ellen will translate.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let us take this moment and elevate our thoughts to our Father, Mother, God, to our Master Jesus, and guide us through our existence with the examples of the law of love. May we all at this moment look up to the Creator and feel the good vibrations that fill this room, touching our minds, touching our souls. Let us feel connected. Let us feel ourselves filled with these energies. And we ask our dear Lord for the courage, perseverance, faith, the energy to understand who we are, to understand what we need to do, and to take the action so we can be the change that we so much expect all around us. And we would like to extend this moment the same thoughts of love that we share right now in this room to all the people in this universe. They are in need of love, in need of care. They are living lost in the despair of their own thoughts, feeling the consequences of their actions. May we embrace all of them, and may all of them feel loved. And we ask that we may go here today, being the seeds of the transformation, so the tree of love can continue to grow and branch out, fulfilling the mission of our Master Jesus. Thank you for the opportunity of being here serving. And may God bless all of us, always. So be it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Now, the group allowed me to share with you guys one thing that we are doing here in Canada, that is the Fraternity Without Borders. Some of you may have heard about it, this organization already. And we are bringing Fraternity Without Borders to Canada. We're very pleased to work with this organization in Brazil. There's a few volunteers here that is also spiritualists, but working hard to help us to bring this here, right? So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to show a little bit about this organization. I'm gonna share one video. It's pretty quick, and then we all are free to have lunch.
Somos a organização Fraternidades Sem Fronteiras. Somos a união de voluntários, padrinhos, apoiadores. Um movimento que começou em 2009 e hoje une milhares de corações. Acreditamos que a mudança que queremos ver no mundo começa dentro de cada um de nós e convidamos a todos para formar essa grande corrente fraterna por um mundo melhor. Na África, estamos em Moçambique. Acolhemos crianças das aldeias que vivem na extrema miséria. Elas recebem alimentação, cuidados com a higiene, participam de atividades pedagógicas e culturais. As primeiras crianças acolhidas hoje são jovens, recebem auxílio para seguir os estudos e formação profissionalizante. Tem também artes, oficinas, cursos e todo incentivo à mentalidade fraterna. Água para a África. Em Moçambique, o sentimento de fraternidade perfura poços, fazendo jorrar água limpa e em abundância para as famílias que antes andavam quilômetros para buscar um balde de água suja. A chegada dos poços muda a paisagem do centro de acolhimento Muzumu. A terra dá o fruto, o alimento vai para o prato e todos aprendem a respeitar a natureza e plantar para colher. Na África, estamos no Senegal. Apoiamos e mantemos o orfanato Chemin de Futur, que tira meninos das ruas de Dakar e dá a eles moradia, estudo, disciplina, cuidados com a saúde e capacita para um bom futuro. Na África, estamos em Madagascar. Uma das realidades mais comovedoras que encontramos. 850 mil pessoas passam fome e sede. Água só comprar. As famílias tomam banho só quando chove e bebem água suja. Unimos esforços. Acolhemos todas as crianças que viviam na rua sem estudar, pedindo migalhas. Hoje elas recebem refeição, atenção à saúde, participam de atividades culturais e todas estão na escola. Juntos, voluntários, colaboradores e comunidade, construímos o Campo da Paz e todos os dias 4.000 crianças e mães recebem alimentação, escovam dentes, tomam banho, lavam suas roupas e bebem água limpa. Cidade da Fraternidade. Ganhamos o terreno, lançamos a campanha e, unindo corações, estamos construindo 100 moradias. Em volta delas, área para cultivo sustentável, armazenamento de produção, oficinas de trabalho, escola, posto médico, espaço de convivência e lavanderia coletiva. Caravanas sem fronteiras vão à África. Médicos, dentistas, engenheiros, profissionais de diferentes áreas, padrinhos da causa, vão a Madagascar e Moçambique. Atendem milhares de crianças. Trabalham, servem, vivenciam fraternidade e tornam-se multiplicadores da causa. No Brasil, estamos no Nordeste. Abraçamos a causa pelo tratamento das crianças com microcefalia. No Centro de Apoio Integrado do IPESC, as crianças recebem o tratamento necessário. Quanto mais cedo, maior a chance de se desenvolver. É acolhimento e esperança para mães e filhos. No Brasil, estamos em Campo Grande. A música toca o sentimento e inspira novos e melhores caminhos. Jovens da periferia da cidade têm a oportunidade de estudar música e integrar a Orquestra Filarmônica Jovem Emanuel, em instrução para viver. Brasil, um coração que acolhe. Estamos na fronteira do Brasil com a Venezuela. Jovens, famílias inteiras atravessam a fronteira para o Brasil em busca de uma chance. Tentam vencer a mais grave crise humanitária que o país já viu. Voluntários, empresários, apoiadores, todos unidos para ajudar as famílias venezuelanas. Construímos um centro de acolhimento onde onde as famílias recebem alimentação, dormitório, oficinas de trabalho e apoio para serviços sociais. Em todos os projetos, um sonho de fraternidade. Em todas as ações, o sentimento, a doação dos padrinhos que sustentam a causa. No Brasil e em vários países, a mobilização por um mundo melhor. A obra coletiva se multiplica pela sensibilidade e apoio de muitos corações. Vamos juntos mais longe, cada um fazendo um pouquinho, e todos ajudando a acabar com a fome e a construir um mundo de paz.
All right, thank you so much. Fraternity Without Borders is completing 10 years now. On November 15, we're celebrating it here in Toronto with an event. We do have a few volunteers, if they don't mind, to stand up for a second. Yeah, Joyce, Marco, Belly, Leo, thank you. I have to run to go to the airport with Sonia and Cicero, but I hope they can answer a few questions that you guys have. But in our website, if you go there, fraternityborders.org, you can find all the information. You can reach out to us through that website. We can connect with you guys later and share more information. But it's all there. This video was in April, created in April, if I'm not wrong, for the meeting that we have every year. And it's already outdated because things happen so fast that we cannot catch up with the videos. You know? The house that they started, 100 houses, it's already more than 100 houses, right? So we keep in Madagascar. And I had the opportunity to be there for the first time in March. It is a beautiful work that they're doing there. So anyone who can help is very welcome. And there's many different ways of helping. Volunteers is one of them. So reach out to us and we'll be glad and happy to talk about it. All right? Thank you so much once again. And hope to see you guys again in 2 years from now.